Q1 White, the man the state of Texas says pulled the trigger on Mo3, just posted on Instagram from behind bars, said everybody he was loyal to has left him, asked his daughter, his family, and the one woman he loves to forgive him for what he's about to do. That post got screenshotted, went viral, and the internet immediately did the math. The man who allegedly caught a body for Yella Beezy is sitting in federal prison on a 9-year gun sentence, staring down a charge, a charge that in Texas carries the death penalty, and the people he did it for ain't even showing up, so he's talking. Q1 White is snitching on Yella Beezy, and Yella Beezy is set to go to trial on February 2nd, 2026. Y'all need to hear this, every single detail, because this ain't just some rap drama. This is a man's life, a dead man's legacy, and a court case that could end with somebody on death row in the state of Texas. Fam, let me break it down for you from the very beginning, because to understand how catastrophic that Instagram post really is, you need to understand everything that led up to it. Let's go back to Oak Cliff, Dallas, Texas, mid-2000s. Two young black men from the same neighborhood, both hungry, both talented, both trying to eat off the same plate. On one side, you got Marquise DeAndre Conway. The world would come to know him as Yella Beezy. On the other side, you got Melvin Noble. The streets knew him as Mo3. Now here's what people outside of Dallas don't understand. Oak Cliff ain't just a neighborhood gang, it's an identity. When you rep Oak Cliff, you rep a specific kind of pride, a specific kind of struggle, a specific zip code with a specific set of politics. So when two dudes from the same area start rising at the same time and competing for the same lane, that friction is inevitable. That's just the math of the streets. The beef between these two reportedly started as far back as the early 2000s. Some people say it was competition, two rising stars in the same local market. Some people say it started over a woman, you know how that goes. But here's the thing, publicly, both of them played it cool. Yella Beezy went on Vlad TV in 2019 and said, word for word, "I don't know him," when asked about Mo3. Mo3 sat down with Vlad in April of that same year and said, "It was nothing, I got no rap beef with anybody." No cap. On the surface, it looked like two professionals keeping it professional, but the streets knew different, the lyrics knew different, the Instagram subliminals knew different. Real recognized real fam, and the people paying attention were already watching the temperature rise. Here's where it gets crazy, and this is the part most people outside Dallas skipped over. In 2017, a Dallas comedian named Roy Pate, also known as Roy Lee, started publicly going at Yella Beezy. His whole angle? He was questioning whether Beezy was really from Oak Cliff. He was calling him out for claiming the hood when, allegedly, Beezy went to school somewhere else. Now on paper, that might sound like petty internet drama, but in street politics, questioning a man's hood, questioning where he's really from, that's fighting words. That's disrespect of the highest order on a local level. This went on for a year, and then in October 2018, everything changed. Roy Pate was North Dallas. He was hit in the leg, but a blood clot formed. 2 weeks later, October 13th, 2018, Roy Pate was dead. Now here's what nobody can explain away. The very next day after Roy Lee died, on October 14th, 2018, Yella Beezy was shot 8 times while driving on the Sam Rayburn Tollway in Lewisville, Texas. 8 times. He survived, hospitalized one day and released, but 8 fam? 8. And the timing? The day after Roy Lee dies? The streets went crazy trying to connect those dots. Mo3 was Roy Lee's close friend. When Roy Lee died, Mo3 didn't stay quiet. He dropped a diss track, "Let Me Find It and Slide on Him," where he seemingly called out his opposition and strongly implied retaliation was on the table. Mo3 also later dropped 219, a direct shot at Yella Beezy on Roy Lee's birthday. Lines in that song referenced Beezy being shot on the tollway. Lines in that song put all the smoke on the table. This wasn't rap beef no more. This was personal. This was grief. This was blood. But publicly, both men kept saying it was nothing. Yella even used footage of himself in the hospital and videos online. Not grieving, not scared, flexing his survival, and Mo3 kept pushing records. The Dallas rap scene just kept moving. But the tension was coiling up like a spring. Fast forward to February 2020, Yella Beezy allegedly got into a physical altercation with Mo3's manager, Brandon Rainwater, at a club. Mo3 went online and called Beezy out publicly. He put it on record, "Your people jumped my people." At this point, any pretense of "we good" was gone. The mask was off. The beef was live and official, whether either of them admitted it on camera or not. Now y'all think about the landscape. By 2020, Mo3 was absolutely ascending. His 2018 hit Everybody had already put him on. In 2019, he dropped the collab album Bad As Mo3 with Boozy Badazz, which charted at number 136 on the Billboard 200. His single Broken Love with Kevin Gates was on its way to going double platinum. Mo3 was not a local rapper anymore. He was going national. He had over 800,000 followers on Instagram. He was in the building, fam. And Yella Beezy had also gone national. That's On Me hit the Billboard Hot 100 in 2017. He had collabs with 2 Chainz, T.I., Gucci Mane, Quavo, Chris Brown. He was signed to Hitco under L.A. Reid. The man was eating. 2 Oak Cliff rappers, both nationally recognized, both eating, and they hated each other. That's a powder keg with a lit match, gang. Somebody was going to get hurt. The streets knew it. The industry knew it. And based on what prosecutors are alleging now, somebody decided to do something about it. Around noon on November 11th, 2020, Veterans Day, Mo3 was traveling northbound on Interstate 35E in Dallas, near the Dallas Zoo, somewhere around Clarendon Drive and Illinois Avenue. He was in his car, he was living his life. A black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up alongside him. Both cars stopped on the highway. The driver of that Camaro got out. He was wearing a ski mask. He was armed with a rifle. He approached Mo3's vehicle. Melvin Noble, Mo3, saw what was coming. He got out of his car and ran. He ran on foot on a busy Dallas interstate in broad daylight. The gunman chased him. Multiple shots were fired. One of those shots hit Mo3 in the back of the head. Another driver on the highway was struck by a stray bullet but survived. Mo3 was rushed to a local hospital. He was 28 years old. He was pronounced dead. The shooting was captured on traffic cameras. Dallas police called it brazen, noting that dozens of civilians were potentially in the line of fire in the middle of the day on a major highway. This was not a quiet hit. This was an execution in public, and somebody planned it that way. Exactly 1 month later, December 9th, 2020, Dallas law enforcement made an arrest. His name, Kewan Dontrell White, 22 years old. He was arrested based on physical description matching, cell phone data placing him at the scene, and witness statements tying him to the area. He was also already out on bond for unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and evading arrest in Dallas County at the time of the murder. This wasn't his first rodeo. White was charged with Mo3's murder. Then in February 2021, he was indicted. And later, in November 2022, he was sentenced to 105 months. That's 8 years and 9 months. In federal prison on a separate gun charge connected to the incident. So he's been sitting in prison this whole time, charged with murder, serving federal time on the guns, waiting. And the internet had already put something together that the courts took years to catch up with. People were posting photos online, Kewan White in photos with people from Yella Beezy's circle. The tweets were saying it out loud, Mo3 killer and Yella Beezy right-hand man. Back in 2020, people were screaming this. But the law moves slow, fam. The law moves very, very slow. For 4 years after Mo3 died, Yella Beezy was free. He kept dropping music. He dropped Bad As Yella Boy in 2022. He got on records with Lil Wayne in 2024. He was living life, gang, making moves. And to some people, it looked like he was going to walk away from this clean. But here's what the streets understood that casual observers didn't. Dallas police and federal agents were both working this case simultaneously. This wasn't just a local homicide investigation. The feds were in the mix, and when the feds get involved, they don't move until they're sure. They don't indict until the picture is complete. In March 2025, 5 years and 4 months after Mo3 was killed, a Dallas County grand jury formally indicted Yella Beezy, real name Marquise DeAndre Conway, on a charge of capital murder while remuneration. That legal phrase, while remuneration, is everything, fam. It means he allegedly paid someone to commit the murder. It means murder for hire. And in Texas, capital murder while remuneration carries the death penalty. On March 20th, 2025, Dallas police arrested Yella Beezy and booked him into the Dallas County Jail. Bond was set at $2 million. $2 million. For context, they set it that high because the charge was that serious and prosecutors believed him to be a flight risk. Now let's talk about what the prosecution had, because this is where it gets real. Investigators cited surveillance footage tying Conway to the murder. They cited a cash withdrawal of $40,000 made by Conway in the days surrounding Mo3's death. $40,000 cash, fam, shortly before or after a murder for hire goes down. You do the math. Prosecutors also had cell phone data, witness statements, and co-defendants. Q White and a second man, Devin Morris Brown, who was indicted in April 2021 for allegedly helping coordinate the killing and for contacting witnesses to influence their testimony. 3 men indicted, and the alleged shooter, Q White, is already in federal custody serving time. Think about what position that puts him in. He's doing nearly 9 years on a gun charge. He's also charged with murder and facing trial, capital murder in Texas, which means he too could potentially face the death penalty if convicted on the murder charge. He has every incentive in the world to cooperate with prosecutors. And then that Instagram post happened. Let's talk about what we saw in that screenshot, because the internet moved fast on this and some people are still playing catch-up. An account connected to Q White, FGC Banzobling, posted to Instagram. The caption on the post said, "Mo3's alleged killer says everyone he was loyal to has left and hopes he can be forgiven for what he's about to do." And the post itself, in White's own words, read, "Everybody I was loyal to done left. It hurts deep inside now that I finally realized what's love when it bring me pain. This the last time anybody will hear from me on Instagram. It's only so much I can take. I just want my daughter, my family, and the one woman I love too forgive me for what I am about to do." Pause. Reread that. Forgive me for what I am about to do. Now, some people on social media wanted to spin that as something darker, as a threat to himself. But the legal community, the street commentators, and people paying close attention to the case read it completely differently. And when you stack that post on top of everything that's happening in the case legally, the picture becomes very clear. Q White is telling his people he's about to talk. He's asking for forgiveness, not for the murder itself, but for what comes next. He's saying the people he risked everything for have abandoned him. He's saying he's sitting in federal prison charged with capital murder, facing the possibility of death row, and the people who allegedly put him in this position aren't showing up. He's saying, "I'm on my own. And if I'm on my own, I'm protecting myself." That's a cooperating witness announcement, gang. That's as close to "I'm snitching" as you can get without sitting in front of a prosecutor and saying it word for word. And Yella Beezy's legal team? They already saw it coming. Even before that post went viral, Beezy's attorneys filed motions demanding that prosecutors reveal the identities of all confidential informants and cooperating witnesses at least 20 days before trial. They asked for any deals or incentives offered to witnesses in exchange for cooperation. They asked for everything. Why would they file those motions? Because they know somebody's talking. Because they see the walls closing in. Let me break down exactly what it means legally when a co-defendant decides to cooperate, because this is crucial. Q White is the alleged triggerman. If his account of events is what prosecutors need to prove the murder for hire charge against Yella Beezy, his testimony is potentially the most devastating piece of evidence in the entire case. A co-defendant who was there, who allegedly pulled the trigger, who allegedly received payment, testifying in open court about who hired him, what was said, when and where the money changed hands. That's not circumstantial evidence. That's direct testimony from an eyewitness to the conspiracy. And here's where it gets crazy. Prosecutors already have other pieces in place. They have the $40,000 cash withdrawal. They have cell phone data. They have surveillance footage. They have Devin Morris Brown as a second co-defendant who allegedly helped coordinate the murder. The state is building this case from multiple angles, but a cooperating witness from inside the conspiracy? That's the crown jewel, fam. That's the piece that takes a strong circumstantial case and turns it into a slam dunk. Now understand where Yella Beezy is right now. He bonded out on March 28, 2025 after a judge reduced his bond from $2 million down to $750,000. But his conditions are severe. He's on house arrest with an ankle monitor. He cannot possess weapons. He cannot contact witnesses, victims, or co-defendants. He cannot leave Dallas without court permission. A judge allowed him limited work release, 1 day a week, 5 hours maximum between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m., just to go to a recording studio. He literally had to petition the court to be able to make music. In August 2025, his attorney, John F. Guscio III, tried to get the bond conditions loosened further, arguing that his music career was suffering. The court denied that motion. The judge wasn't hearing it, gang. She also said during the original bond reduction hearing, and I want to quote this directly because it's important, she said, "It's pretty egregious to watch that video, but the court also took into consideration the evidence or lack of evidence the state presented." She was essentially saying, the video of the murder is horrifying, the evidence is still developing, but I'll still give you a bond. That tells you the case isn't airtight yet from a legal procedural standpoint, but not airtight yet is very different from weak. By late 2025, Yella Beezy's legal team was filing motions about something else entirely. Prosecutors had dumped 16 terabytes of evidence on the defense. 16 terabytes. That's an astronomical amount of data. The defense filed a motion arguing that much of it was random, repetitive, irrelevant. Long videos where nothing happens, jail calls that don't involve Beezy, files labeled with confusing numbers. Their argument was essentially, you're burying us in noise so we can't find the real signal. And that tells you something about how aggressively the prosecution is building this case. A pre-trial hearing was scheduled for January 9th, 2026. Yella Beezy was actually supposed to appear in court on January 16th, 2026, but he was absent because his mother passed away. The trial date remained February 2nd, 2026, and that trial could result in Yella Beezy being sentenced to death if convicted. Texas isn't playing, fam. Texas does not give out death penalties as threats. They follow through. Meanwhile, Devin Maurice Brown, the third man charged in this case, is scheduled for his own trial in November 2026. His case could overlap with and directly impact Beezy's defense strategy. Prosecutors allege Brown helped coordinate the killing and actively reached out to witnesses to intimidate them into changing their testimony. If Brown flips, or if witnesses he was trying to pressure now feel free to speak, that's another layer of exposure for the alleged mastermind. Here's the real tea, and this is the part that cuts the deepest when you really think about it. Q White was allegedly loyal enough to pull a trigger, chase a man down a highway, shoot him in the back of the head, and drive away in broad daylight on I-35 with traffic cameras rolling. He was allegedly loyal enough to take a 9-year federal prison sentence on a gun charge and not say a word for years. He was allegedly loyal enough to sit in a cell charged with capital murder while other people walked around free. And in return, according to that Instagram post, everybody left. Every single person he was loyal to, gone. Now look at Yella Beezy's side of this. After Beezy got arrested in March 2025, he dropped a new single in September called Blame It On Me. He was still making music. He was petitioning courts for more freedom to record. He had a lawyer filing motions, fighting the case, making legal arguments about too much evidence. He was operating as if he could still maneuver out of this situation. But here's what nobody can maneuver out of, fam. If the man who allegedly pulled that trigger, who is also charged with murder, who is also looking at potentially dying in a Texas prison, decides that the loyalty went one way and it's time to balance the scales, no amount of legal motions, no amount of 16 terabyte evidence dumps, no amount of insufficient forensic evidence arguments changes what a jury hears from a direct witness to a murder conspiracy. The streets have been saying for years that this case was coming. When Beezy did that Vlad TV interview in 2019 and said he didn't even know who Mo3 was, people shook their heads. When Beezy was asked in that 2024 Can I Vent interview why he never acknowledged Mo3's death and he said, what was the point? People shook their heads again. When Beezy got arrested in March 2025 and the very same Q White that the streets had been linking to Beezy's circle since 2020 turned out to be the alleged hitman, people nodded. Real recognized real, fam. The streets knew before the courts caught up. Let's take a second and talk about Melvin Noble, because in all of this legal chaos, in all of these court dates and bond hearings and evidence dumps, it's easy to forget that a man is dead. A 28-year-old man from Dallas who was making some of the most authentic music coming out of Texas. A man with over 800,000 followers who was on his way to becoming one of the biggest artists the South had ever seen. Mo3's impact didn't stop when he died. His posthumous projects, Shawtaz 4, Eva, and Legend, kept charting. His song, Outside, Better Days with OG Bobby Billions kept connecting with people going through hard times. His 2020 hit Broken Love with Kevin Gates went double platinum. A man who was murdered on a highway kept going double platinum from Beyond the Grave. That's not just talent, that's legacy. And just earlier this year, his estate won a major court battle in Sherman, Texas. An audio engineer had claimed partial ownership of nearly 130 of Mo3's tracks, including 51 unreleased songs, after his death. The jury sided with Mo3's estate, ruled that Melvin Noble alone owned his work. forced the engineer to hand over the files, cancel copyright claims, and pay damages. His family is protecting what he built. Even in death, the people who loved Mo3 are fighting for him. That matters. That's real. Mo3 was 28. He had a daughter. He had a whole life ahead of him. And if the allegations in this case are true, he was hunted on a Dallas highway because of a beef that started over neighborhood politics and grew into something nobody could stop. Y'all zoom out with me for a second, because this story is bigger than two rappers from Dallas. This is a story about what happens when the streets come into the music industry and the industry doesn't know how to handle it. Both of these men were signed to major labels. Both were working with industry titans. Gucci Mane, 2 Chainz, Boozy, Kevin Gates, Lil Wayne, both were making music that was crossing over nationally. And yet the same beef that might have started over a woman or a neighborhood or a comedian's disrespect years before either of them were famous, allegedly followed them all the way to a murder for hire on a Dallas interstate. How many times do we have to watch this? How many more times does rap beef have to become a real body before the culture reckons with what it glorifies? Because the irony cuts deep here. Yella Beezy had a song called That's On Me. And right now, if these allegations are true, everything that happened to Mo3 on November 11th, 2020 is on him. But there's another layer to this conversation, fam, and I want to be real about it. The criminal justice system in this country, and specifically in Texas, has its own complicated history with black men from communities like Oak Cliff, capital murder charges, the death penalty. These are not outcomes that come without cost, regardless of guilt. When we talk about Yella Beezy potentially facing the death penalty, we're talking about a system that will literally end a man's life. That conversation deserves to be had with full eyes open, not just with the energy of he got what he deserved. What is clear is this: Q-On White allegedly took a life on behalf of someone else and got left holding the bag. Mo3 is dead and his daughter grows up without a father. Yella Beezy is on house arrest with an ankle monitor facing a death penalty charge. Devin Maurice Brown is sitting in Dallas County Jail. 3 men whose lives are destroyed, and 1 man who was already dead before any of this landed in a courtroom. That's the cost of beef that nobody ever talks about when they're hyping it up online. That's the bill that comes due. So let me bring it all the way home, gang. Let me lay out why the title of this video is not an exaggeration. Q-On White posted on Instagram from behind bars, said everyone he was loyal to has abandoned him, asked for forgiveness for what he's about to do. The defense team for Yella Beezy is already filing motions asking about informants and cooperating witnesses, which tells you they know somebody's talking. The prosecution has 16 terabytes of evidence, a $40,000 cash withdrawal, cell phone data, surveillance footage, a co-defendant in Devin Brown who also has every incentive to flip, and potentially the trigger man himself about to testify against the man who allegedly sent him. Trial date, February 2nd, 2026. Potential sentence, if convicted, death. This is not a case where the evidence is thin. This is not a case where somebody's hoping their lawyer finds a technicality. This is a capital murder case in Texas, the state that executes more people than any other in this country. And the man who was allegedly inside the car, who allegedly pulled the trigger, who allegedly received payment to end a human life, that man just waved goodbye to his Instagram account and asked his daughter to forgive him. It's over, fam. Not because we want it to be. Not because Mo3 fans finally got their satisfaction. It's over because the math doesn't lie. When the alleged shooter talks, the alleged architect of the murder goes down. That's how murder for hire cases work. That's how the law works. That's how loyalty that only runs in one direction always ends. Melvin Noble, Mo3, and was running on that highway trying to survive. He didn't make it, but right now, in 2026, the people allegedly responsible for taking him off this earth are watching their walls close in one by one, and the man who was allegedly left to hold the bag for all of it just decided he's done holding it alone. Drop a comment below. You think Q-On White actually testifies? You think Yella Beezy beats this case? You think the prosecution has enough even without a cooperating witness? I want to hear from y'all, because this trial is about to be one of the most watched legal cases in hip-hop history. And we gonna be here covering every single move. Rest up, Mo3, everybody still listening.